This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. As we start today's program, I want you to think of your toughest relationship. Now, think of a relationship that is good but could be great. On today's program, we welcome best-selling author Shaunti Feldhahn, who's here to reveal 3 simple steps proven to make any relationship stronger. She calls it the Kindness Challenge. At this time, let's welcome best-selling author Shaunti Feldhahn. Good to have you, Shaunti.
It's great to be with you.
What a name, Shaunti Feldhahn.
I just did it to be confusing to people. Yeah, make it really difficult to spell. Yeah.
Well, at least 2 million people have figured it out because you've sold over 2 million books, so you're doing something right.
Yeah, it's been really remarkable to see what God has done. I just got my, I think, 3rd Chinese language translation in of one of the books recently. Like, how on earth did that happen?
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, it's been neat to see what God does.
Well, today we're going to talk about your newest book called The Kindness Challenge, and on the back of the book, you ask what I believe is a rhetorical question. You say, have we ever needed kindness more? And of course, the answer is no. We need kindness more now than ever.
What do you mean? Everybody's so sweet these days.
Well, you wouldn't have written a book about it otherwise. So what has happened to our culture?
You know, it's interesting, in all seriousness. When I was sharing the research that I had done with Dr. Chapman, Gary Chapman, who wrote The 5 Love Languages. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting as we started talking about stuff, because I bounced some of the research off of him, you know, before I write my books, that kind of thing sometimes. And he was saying, you know, people call this the argument culture, because there is this sense that it's okay to be mean, it's okay to share things in public that we never would have shared, 20 years ago. It's okay to say these things over social media. Mm-hmm. It's become okay to even do things that we kind of think of as healthy, like, oh, my husband is driving me crazy, and you think I'm venting, mm-hmm. I'm letting a little steam out of the kettle so it doesn't explode later, so that's okay, that's like a good thing. And we've gone slowly down this road to the point where, without realizing it, it's not just all those other people out there who are being unkind. We are being unkind every day, and we have no idea.
Do you think it's a question of osmosis, just because even we as Christians are around unkind people, that it's kind of seeping into our own lifestyle?
I think that's certainly part of it, and there's one of the principles that we found in the research project is that, what you allow in is going to be what comes out, right? And so to some degree, we're supposed to be in the world and not of it, and there's a line there that you're not sure exactly what that looks like. Like, you don't realize necessarily that you watch, let's just say you're watching, news cable, and the commentators are kind of shouting at each other, and they're mm-hmm. shouting over each other, and they're mm-hmm. interrupting each other, and you don't realize that to some degree that's, it's probably fine, but to another degree, it kind of seeps in there, and you don't realize you maybe get more agitated, and then you start talking over people when they disagree with you. And it's all these things you never would have done before. So some of it is osmosis, but I think some of it, honestly, is just not realizing what is in our heart. Uh-huh. All this, the negative part of the stuff that's in our heart, which is why we need Jesus, that does actually come out in general anyway, even more than we thought it did.
So you had an aha moment some 10 years back. You decided to do something about our culture, a culture of unkindness, turning it into a culture of kindness. Tell us about that moment.
So there was an interesting thing that happened. Are you talking about my event with the woman who really, I sort of got this aha that, wow, this could be important? Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I was speaking at a women's conference, and just any other women's conference. I speak at a lot of them. And this one woman stood up and asked a question, just like everybody does at most women's conferences, which is, basically, Shaunti, you say that I need to respect my husband. I need to show him that I appreciate him, that that's important to him, but what if I don't? Like, what if he's disappointed me? What if he's hurt me? What if there's all these problems and I don't appreciate him anymore or whatever? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I answer this question? This was pretty early on. And I said, there's two answers to that. And one of them is we're commanded to show appreciation and respect to our husbands, for example, whether or not we feel like it, just like they're commanded to show us love, even if, we're not particularly lovable that day.
Right.
And so that's the first thing. It's a step of obedience. But the second answer is that when we take that step of obedience, God often changes our feelings. And so I gave her a challenge that it ended up being the genesis, the start of this years ago, without me knowing it, that I had heard from Nancy Lee DeMoss, who's now Nancy DeMoss Wolgemuth, and certain pieces of it ended up coming into what I did later. And I said, first, don't say anything negative about your husband for 30 days. I'm going to give you a 30-day challenge. Don't say anything negative about him. That's either to him or about him to somebody else. Like, it's not just a matter of being sweet to him when you want to strangle him. You can't go to your girlfriends at work and complain either. And then the second thing, for 30 days, find one thing that you can sincerely praise, you can sincerely affirm, and tell him and tell somebody else. And so it's not just, I can't say these negative things about the fact that he never does the chores, but I have to look for things to praise. And to recognize, he came home early to take the kids to soccer. Thank you for doing that, honey. And then you go to your girlfriends at work and say, do you know what he did yesterday? And so I told her those. And then another thing that we've added over the years is to do a small act of generosity, just one little thing for him every day, small little act of generosity. And I suggested that to her. And, then I, finished the conference and flew away. 3 years later, I'm back in that same state, completely other end of the state, and doing another conference, another set of questions. Another woman asked the same question. I gave the same kind of answer, and another woman raised her hand, and she stood up, and she didn't ask me a question. She looked at the first woman and said, if you do what she just said, it's going to change everything. And then she turned to me and she said, you won't remember me, but 3 years ago, you came to my church, completely different part of the state. You gave me that same answer, and I wanted to ignore you. I didn't want to do it, but I didn't want my kids to grow up in a broken home. And so I did it, and it completely changed everything. And she started crying, and of course I'm starting to cry. And she said, I realized so much of our problems weren't just about him. Without me realizing it, they were also about me and the things that I was doing. I was being so negative every day, and I had no idea. And I wasn't giving him as much affirmation nearly as I thought. And I started to do this. His defensiveness started to lower. He started to open up. He started to give me what I needed. And now we have an unbelievable marriage. And it's just because there was this little shift, these little things that I did differently. And this is what we found. We call it the 30-day kindness challenge. When we tested this on the survey, it impacts the other person. It transforms the relationship. But what it most does is it completely changes you.
Well, you dedicated 10 years of your professional life to the study of kindness. Why do you think it took so long?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's one of these God things where all the way along, I'm doing other studies, right? Like I'm doing a, big national research study of men and how men think, or of women, or of teenagers, diving into the corporate world and the workplace. So I'm doing all of this. But as I was going, I kept going, there's something that I'm seeing. There's a thread somehow or another that I'm through all of these studies. There's something there. And what is it that's the common denominator in all of this? And that's eventually when I realized, wait a minute, what I'm seeing is the impact of kindness. What I'm seeing is that kindness, it turns out, is this superpower that will change any relationship, no matter how distressed it is or how good it is. You just want it to be great. And the thing is, we just don't know how to do kindness, and that's where those three things come in, is that if you do those three things for 30 days, you'll find it just changes everything. It's super simple, but it changes everything.
On today's Roadshow, we are taking the Kindness Challenge as presented in the new book by today's very special guest, Shaunti Feldhahn. We're going to talk about how we can take the challenge. She says it just takes 30 days to improve any relationship, so we'll talk more about that after this. I'm David Warren, here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world. Oasis Network. On today's road show, Shaunti Feldhahn is with us. I'm David Warren, your host, and Shaunti, a little earlier we talked about that this book, The Kindness Challenge, was 10 years in the making or in the writing. You surveyed thousands of people along the way, and you really delved into their inner insecurities and needs. What would you say are the most common inner insecurities and needs among men and women?
You know, it's interesting. It really breaks down into two different sets of insecurities amongst men and women, and this is more diving into probably the books that I'm most known for, which are For Women Only and For Men Only, that help men and women understand each other. It turns out that for men, without us as women realizing it, that men look super confident, but, you know, on the inside, there's this sense of self-doubt, and it's a self-doubt that's basically, am I any good at what I do? Like guys might tell me, I want to be a great husband. I really want to make my wife happy, but do I have any clue how to do that? Am I doing a good job at that? Am I any good as a dad? Or do I know what I'm doing as a salesman? Like a lot of guys told me it's the imposter complex, you know? And it's this sense that someone is going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing. And we don't realize as women, we don't realize that that's in there. And so we don't realize that it's a raw nerve. You can hit it without knowing it. But you also don't realize what incredible opportunity you have. And this is where we come into the more of the kindness challenge theme, is that you also don't realize that there are certain types of affirmation that if you're doing the challenge for a husband or for a son or for that difficult male boss at work that's really cantankerous, but you really kind of need a good relationship with your boss, and you really want to make one of these relationships great, that it gives you this opportunity to focus on, okay, what is it that this person has done? They might secretly be insecure about, but you can say, that was great. You have no idea as a woman, for example, for all the women listening to this, when you say thank you to your husband, to your son, to your male boss, everybody needs to hear thank you, but to a guy, it's like you just roped the moon. It's this sense of she saw what I did and appreciated it. And it's these little things like, you know, thanks for changing the light bulbs, honey. Like, you might think, really? That's a type of affirmation? Yes. Like, you noticed that the lights were out in the hallway. It was driving me nuts. Thank you so much for doing that. It's a little bitty thing, but it's a big thing for a guy.
Well, Shaunti, what is the kindest affirmation a man could do for a woman?
So the most important thing for a woman is to address directly what we found statistically is the main unknown insecurity of women, which is this underground question that's kind of like, am I lovable? You know, you may think, you know, you saw her walk down the aisle and you said, I do, and you may think, okay, that's good, on to the next thing. She knows I love her. And instead, no, most women, we found it was 80% of the women on the surveys, there's a question in there. Like, does he still love me? Is he glad he married me? And so your affirmation to her, I mean, you come up and she's just doing the dishes or something, and you put your arms around her, just give her a big hug and say, I'm so glad I married you. It's silly, but it's a little thing that has a big impact. Or, I mean, you know, you maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you do all the laundry and all the cooking, and you wonder, does he even notice? Like, he's so busy with his job, does he even notice? And when you say, I can't believe you do all this for me, honey. All the laundry. I mean, without you, I'd be going commando every day. Like, thank you for doing that. And it's a little thing, but it tells her, you're special. I appreciate you. It's these little bitty affirmations that we found. If you just think about that even once every day and say something, it really has a big impact.
Okay, but what about a kind affirmation for a man to say to a woman coworker, a female that is not his wife?
Yeah, no, and that's it's really, really important, obviously, to have those boundaries in there. But even those affirmations that are basically saying that you have value, like think of it that way, rather than you're lovable, which is your wife or your daughter, or your mom or whatever. But if you translate that into you have value and I value you, and it's little things that are, again, like, for example, you really are good at this type of analysis. You should apply for that deal that they're opening up. They need people. You'd be good at that. That's very appropriate, but it tells somebody, I've been noticed.
Okay.
And it really matters.
In your new book, The Kindness Challenge, and if listeners, you just turned your radios on, Shaunti Feldhahn is with me today talking about this book and her 30-day kindness challenge that we hopefully will all take after this roadshow is complete. Two revealing quotes that I would like to mention, and I'll just hand it over to you, Shaunti. First of all, you say that the path to our happy place, everybody wants to be happy. That's our big quest in life. The path to our happy place starts with one choice: whether or not to be kind, especially when we don't want to be. Talk about that.
Yeah, so here's the problem. So, we were talking about how easy it is to be unkind and kind of slip into the unkindness of our culture without realizing it, right? And part of the problem is that it is so all around us. There are those relationships and those situations that make us absolutely crazy because somebody is legitimately being unkind to us. Maybe your boss really is way too harsh and it hurts your feelings. Or, if you're a dude, you won't say it hurts your feelings, but you say it makes me mad, right? So it's one of those things that there's a problem. Or maybe it's, your stepmom, and you really wish you had a better relationship with her, but she can be super difficult, and she is passive-aggressive, and it just drives you nuts. And she says these things that you're like, I just can't handle it. It's cruel. Or the rude driver that cuts you off on the freeway, right? I mean, there's all these situations where you feel like there's active unkindness towards you. That is when it is most difficult for us to respond in a sense of kindness. But that's when we're most supposed to. It's interesting. When I started looking at this, I realized this is essentially what the Golden Rule is about. When you look at the Sermon on the Mount and you look at what Jesus was saying, we teach our kids, the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And we think of it as this kind of sweet sentiment and kind of a nice way to live. And you look at what he actually said, it is not a sweet sentiment. It is actually a situation. What he's talking about is where there is active injustice towards you, active meanness, active unkindness. Somebody is stealing from you, for example. And what Jesus has called us to do there is he said, I want you to treat that mean, unkind, unjust person in the kind and generous and grace-filled way you wish they were treating you.
Right. And that's doing spiritual battle, Shaunti.
Totally.
And the payoff is you become a happy person.
Yeah.
So it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, and yet the payoff is, but I get to be happy if I do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. We actually found, as we were going through the research, we actually found that when we say, kindness is a superpower, that we're not kidding. I mean, there is something about choosing to be kind that, for example, one of the ways we say it is that it makes you bulletproof emotionally. It's crazy. Like, let's just say that you're in traffic and you have been waiting your turn in a long line of cars to get off the exit. And then there's that car that always like speeds up beside you and cuts in the line, and your head wants to explode, right? Well, you're probably nicer than me, David, but my head wants to explode whenever that happens. And so I want to pull up on the bumper of the car in front of me, and now you're not getting in here. And instead, if I take a deep breath and I say, you know what, I'm going to respond in kindness, and I wave them in, even though they shouldn't be waved in, they're cutting in line, but I respond in kindness, I wave them in, and suddenly I'm not crazy anymore. Suddenly my feelings have changed. I have taken away that other person's power to make me upset.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because my second quote I wanted to read from the Kindness Challenge book that you wrote is when you said, whether we thrive or not depends far more on how we choose to treat others than how we ourselves are treated. That's powerful, Shaunti.
It is amazing, and it really, truly amazing to see the truth of that come out in the research, in the numbers. And I'll give you an example. When I got the spreadsheets back with the results of the final surveys, because what we did is we had these study groups of people, and we had them start with a pre-survey, had them do the 30-day kindness challenge, do those 3 little things every day, and then at the end, take another survey, right? And I got the survey results back, and I actually had to rerun my spreadsheet. I'm like, this cannot possibly be correct. And I almost started crying when I saw it, because one of the numbers, for example, is that these people who were doing the 30-day kindness challenge, they were the ones doing all the work, right? They were the ones trying to be kind to a difficult spouse or a difficult boss, or, to do something for their kids or whatever. And yet at the end of the 30 days, around 7 out of 10, sometimes it was like 2/3, sometimes it was 75%, but somewhere around 7 out of 10 people, huge number, said they themselves felt more loved and appreciated at the end of it. They're doing all the work, and yet they felt more loved at the end.
So, Shaunti, building off of that, someone listening today who feels like a victim where they work or in their own home, what should he or she do?
Well, let's not downplay the fact that they may, in fact, there may be injustice, there may be unkindness.
Correct.
Now, if there's active abuse, that's a different thing. Like we say,
right,
you've got to remove yourself from that situation. That's a completely different situation. Because kindness, by the way, as a quick aside, kindness is strength as well. It's looking out for the best interest of the other person. And it is not in your spouse's best interest, or yours, obviously, for them to become an abuser without consequence.
Correct.
That's bad for everybody. But other than that, if there is a situation where you feel like there's, silence, like your husband just shuts down on you, and it hurts your feelings so bad, or that you feel like, maybe your husband is listening to this and your wife is so critical and it hurts you, or what your marriage has gotten into problems, or maybe, again, it's, the elderly parent that lives with you that's really cantankerous, or whatever, you may in fact feel like a victim sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if you apply these 3 things for 30 days, if you don't say anything negative about them, either to them or about them to anybody else, for 30 days, you find something sincerely that you can praise, you can sincerely affirm, and you tell them and you tell somebody else, and you do a little action of generosity for them, just some little action of kindness, you will see those positive things more often, and you will see the negative ones less often. They're still there, but suddenly they don't loom as large in your mind, and suddenly you kind of like this other person more, and you start actually wanting to be more kind. It's astounding that basically doing Philippians 4:8, thinking on whatever is worthy of praise, mm-hmm, rather than what's legitimately worthy of driving you crazy, the peace of God that passes all understanding, it guards your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. It's amazing. It's God's prescription.
Shaunti, before we go to break, I want to talk about what you call kindness blindness. And about everybody listening today, let's say everybody listening today, has a little bit of unkindness in him or her. We're not perfected yet. So how can we become aware of our blind spots in regard to kind acts or being unkind towards someone?
So the most important thing that I found is that first, that number one thing in the 30-day kindness challenge is don't say anything negative about them, right? Well, the problem is, what does it mean, negative? And once you start actually having to do this when you're not allowed to vent, for example, you suddenly go, oh my gosh, I did this a lot more than I thought I did. And the key is, what I honestly think is crucial, is to go through the list of the types of negativity. You have no idea how often you're negative every day and you don't realize it. Go through the types of unkindness. It's all in Chapter 6. It's all laid out that way. And you can actually check off and go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that, for example, for me, exasperation turns out to be one of the types of negativity. And I get exasperated with my kids every day. And I had no idea that I'm basically saying, you're an idiot, right? I had no clue that that's what I'm saying, but that's what I'm saying. And so look at the different types of negativity, even things that you would never think of as negativity, like catastrophizing, which I had to look up what that word meant, by the way. But it's essentially thinking ahead and going, oh my gosh, if this happens, it's going to be a catastrophe. We've done a lot of that this past year during the election, right? If so-and-so gets elected or if this and this happens, it's going to be a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. Or if my daughter dates this guy, it's going to be a catastrophe. And you know what? Maybe that's true. Maybe it would actually be a catastrophe. The problem is that confronting that potential catastrophe, we sometimes become very unkind and very negative. And we can figure out how to do this in a way that still fits with Jesus' commandment to speak the truth in love. There's so many ways that we are negative and unkind, and we have to have our eyes open to them.
So we need to recognize what our negative patterns are. That we just fall into, like maybe when we're not feeling well that day or somebody pushed our buttons. It's kind of our go-to negative reaction to things.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's actually becomes a default for us, like for me, unfortunately. If my son has worked on his homework, he just turned 14, he's in 8th grade, he's a good kid, but, like a lot of boys, he's got ADHD and he doesn't always think about things. That if he forgets his homework, I roll my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, buddy, you worked on that. I can't believe you forgot it again. Well, you know what? I've just said you're an idiot. I would never say those words out loud, but that's what I've just said, because unfortunately, irritation has become a default for me. Uh-huh. That is something I have to work on. I have to let God work on that in me, but I can't until I realize that I'm even doing it.
Right.
And so that's where I say, look at the list and look at the things that are like, oh my gosh, I do that. Never would have thought it, but I do. Or look at the list and go, you know what, this and this, these aren't issues for me. And you figure out, what do I need to work on? If I'm going to do the 30-day kindness challenge, what do I need to practice?
And that would be a great way to do a personal Bible study. That's what you would target. Other examples would be you have a propensity to point out others' mistakes. You grumble. You're suspicious. And you even point out that sarcasm is a negative pattern or negativity pattern, you call it.
It is. We don't realize it, but, we like trash talking in our house. Like, we play games, and it's kind of fun and teasing, and everybody knows that there's total goodwill, so we can get away with it, we think. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, if sarcasm happens a lot, it starts to wear you down a little bit, and people start to think, do they actually mean some of that? Like, was there some truth to that? And people start to build walls. It's amazing. Once you actually realize that you've done it and you can't do it for 30 days, it's not the end of the world. Just don't be sarcastic for 30 days if that's a thing for you. And suddenly, A, you realize how often that happened, mm-hmm. and B, you realize, wow, I've let walls down, and the people around me have let walls down that I didn't even know were there.
On today's roadshow, Shaunti Feldhahn is shining the light on the importance of kindness in our lives, and she has written a new book entitled The Kindness Challenge out on Waterbrook Press, subtitled 30 Days to Improve Any Relationship. And Shaunti, thanks to your millions of books being sold, it's very easy to find your books. So spell your name for us. And again, the name of the book is The Kindness Challenge.
Yeah, my first name is Shaunti. And, so you can find this, honestly, the best place is to go to jointhekindnesschallenge.com. You can find it at any bookstore. But here's why I'm hoping people will do that.
Okay.
I hope they'll go to jointhekindnesschallenge.com to sign up for the 30-Day Kindness Challenge. Because we've got these things where you send out reminder emails. Like if you want to get the reminder emails, they're also in the back of the book, the daily reminders, so you can do it either way. But get the reminder emails, and you get these tips and hints every day. And you also, on the website, you know how you said you could do a personal Bible study?
Mm-hmm.
So we created, and it's all free. Like all of this stuff on the website is totally free. We created small group materials also where people could do this, because I feel like for me, if I'm doing the 30-Day Kindness Challenge, I want to do it with a couple of girlfriends. I want to get a group of people together and say, okay, let's do this together for our husbands, or let's do this for our kids, or everybody do it for somebody different. But you have somebody to walk alongside you. You need some way to have some discussion time, and all of that is available. The videos that go with it, everything's available for free at jointhekindnesschallenge.com.
Jointhekindnesschallenge.com. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about some of the specifics of Shaunti's 30-Day Kindness Challenge. Back right after this.
The Roadshow is a listener favorite which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup and contact information, and links to our Roadshow sponsors and its host. So join us for the Roadshow, whether on your radio, computer, or mobile device at oasisnetwork.org.
Reading from the back of the book, The Kindness Challenge, by today's very special guest, Shaunti Feldhahn. By the way, I'm David Warren, your host. Here is a little bit about Shaunti. She's the author of many groundbreaking books, including For Women Only, The Male Factor, and The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages, which have sold more than 2 million copies. A popular public speaker, Feldhahn earned her master's degree at Harvard University and worked on Wall Street and Capitol Hill before developing an innovative research method to deliver fresh insights into personal and work relationships. She and her husband, Jeff, live in Atlanta with their 2 children. And might I add, you do not have a Southern accent, Shaunti Feldhahn.
That's because I'm not originally from Atlanta.
Wow, what a pedigree. Harvard University, worked on Wall Street, Capitol Hill. These are some places that could use some kindness.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the things I look back on the experience that I got without ever knowing that eventually I'd be doing this relationship research. Because, people are like, Wall Street? Like, really? Relationship research? But it turns out, honestly, the skills that I got there in analytics and research and trying to identify the things that matter, it's really amazing how God is using that in a way that's really, I hope, going to help the church first and foremost to be the head and not the tail, right? To step up to this movement of kindness that I think I see that God seems to be pushing out everywhere, and have the church lead it. And then my hope is, honestly, that as the church steps forward in kindness, it's going to transform this meme culture we're living in, and that will then transform Washington. That's going to transform Wall Street. It's just, it has to start with us.
We hear about we need to let our lights shine. Well, what better way than to express kindness toward others?
Yeah, it is the way. I mean, that is what God has called us to do. The reality is that Jesus said, this is how they're going to know that you're with
Christians.
me. It's because you love one another, right? And what does that look like, though? And that tends to be the problem today. I think all of us know that we're supposed to be kind. My guess is that there's probably almost no one listening to this who doesn't want that. Everybody wants to be kind, especially those of us who follow Jesus. We know that should be a hallmark of our life. And we think it already is. And we don't realize all the ways that it's not. All the ways that we are, for example, like we were talking earlier, negative without realizing it, unkind without realizing it. And it's not until we start doing something where I'm picking one person. It doesn't necessarily work the same way if you just do this random acts of kindness in the culture.
I'm glad you're pointing that out, because that was my next question. I was going to bring up to the audience that this 30-day challenge of showing kindness, you want us to pick just one person. Why is that?
Well, here's the reason. It's because there is no way, if you're doing random acts of kindness, that you're going to be as mindful about it every day as if, for example, you pick one individual person who is actually perhaps a challenging relationship. Doesn't have to be, you might have a good relationship with your spouse. You just want it to be awesome, right? But maybe it is challenging for right now. Maybe it is a difficult situation, and suddenly you're not allowed to say anything negative. And you go, oh my word, I had no idea how often I say negative things. And I'll give you an example. So one of the things that we found in the research is that people would say, we would ask them, so how often, the second element of the 30-day kindness challenge is, find something you can sincerely praise every day, right? So how often do you think you praise this person? How often do you think you say something affirming to them? And the average answer for people is probably, a couple times a day, 2 to 3 times a day. Then they actually started doing it for that one person.
Right.
And they realized, oh my gosh, it's more like I say those affirming things twice a week. Not nearly as often as I think I do. And so you work on it. Like, okay, have I said a word of praise to my mother-in-law today? No, I haven't. Okay, so thank you so much for, how much patience you had when you were watching our kids. I saw that they were trying to provoke you and you didn't let them. Thank you for having patience. Okay, I've said my word of affirmation today. And then you go, how often do days and days and days pass that I don't do that? And you're never going to have your eyes open to that unless you do it with one person.
And let me interject this, that you say in the Kindness Challenge book that you don't have to let them know what you're doing. No,
actually, most people didn't. Most of the people in the study group, again, this is all based on these big research studies, and most of the 734, whatever the number was, people, they didn't tell the other person. They didn't tell their spouse they were doing it because they wanted to do it without the risk that the other person would think, you're only saying that because you have to, right? Now, if you're in a great marriage and you want to do this together, or you're in a kind of an iffy marriage and you really want to up your game and improve it and do it together, by all means, have at it. We actually had one of our test sites was a big church in San Diego that did that, and the couples all did it together. And it was really impactful. But also, don't worry about it if you just want to do it on your own and see what happens. That's good, too.
Shaunti, I'm glad you mentioned iffy marriages. Would you not implore all listeners tuned in today who don't feel good about their relationship with someone else, and I'm really thinking about husbands and wives more than anyone right now, would you not implore them to at least give this challenge a chance before making a decision?
Absolutely. I honestly think if you will try this, if you do these 3 things for 30 days, there is a very high chance that it will not only make things better, give you more hope, but it could actually, and there were situations in the test groups where it did actually change everything. The key, though, and I hope people hear me on this, if you're in an iffy marriage, if you've been thinking about walking away, if you've been dealing with something for years and you just don't know if you can handle it anymore, honestly, the key is you have to be willing to do it completely one-sided with absolutely no expectation at all that the other person is even going to notice. Like, you have to go into it being totally okay with that potential outcome and saying, I'm doing this in order to work on me and my side of the relationship, and my husband, my wife, they might not even notice that I do it. I may get 0 kudos at all. And that mindset honestly is what God calls us to, and that is what ends up changing the other person's heart and mind in most cases. Now, it was 89% of relationships improved. That wasn't 100%, right? It doesn't always work that way. But I urge people to give that a try.
But 9 out of 10 people saw dramatic improvement within their relationships.
Yeah, very
or that
much so.
specific one, yeah.
Yeah, well, and also think about the fact that this is only 30 days, too. I mean, for some marriages, for example, or some other kinds of contentious relationships, you've been having a contentious situation and hurt feelings for years. And we can't expect a dramatic overnight shift in something that has that much baggage built up, right, in 30 days. Now, the good news is that often there was that kind of fairly dramatic shift, or at least enough of one that the person got the hope to keep going. I actually had a lot of people who, after the 30-day kindness challenge were over, who were just a part of the study group, and there was no reason that they had to keep doing it, right? You know, the research was done, and they're like, no, I'm going to keep going because I see this huge hope coming. And that is so worth it.
I think you were a little tricky, personally, Shaunti, because
really?
I think you want this to be a lifestyle of kindness, but you broke it down into little bite-sized pieces, and you said 30 days. Just give me 30 days.
You caught me.
I did.
You caught me. Yeah, totally. Actually, what we found in all seriousness is that when you do this thing like we were talking about for one person, and what changes in you as your eyes are opened to how often you were negative, for example, or how little you gave praise or how little you did these little actions of generosity, what starts to happen is that now your eyes can't be closed again. Right? Your eyes have been open. And so suddenly you start working on it more just because you want to be a kind person. Like it becomes more of a habit. And as it becomes more of a habit and you start seeing, life's a lot better now, you're motivated to want to keep going. So, yeah, it was kind of tricky probably, but people like having the habit of kindness. It makes life much better.
So, in essence, you become a kindness addict.
And you become a kindness carrier. It's like carrying a good version of a virus that spreads really quickly.
I love that.
Yeah, other people see the benefit of it too.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but come back and talk about doing the 30-day kindness challenge as a group, whether where we work or where we go to church. But before we do, Shaunti Feldhahn has written this book we're talking about today, The Kindness Challenge. It's out on Waterbrook Press, available wherever books are sold, also through the website we'll talk about after the break, which is jointhekindnesschallenge.com. Again, jointhekindnesschallenge.com. But if you choose to buy the book at your local Christian bookstore or online, the name of the book again, The Kindness Challenge by Shaunti, Shaunti, Feldhahn, Feldhahn. And I'll be back with Shaunti for the wrap-up after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. Well, this has been eye-opening today on The Road Show. I'm David Warren, your host, and we're all learning about the power of kindness. And today's guest, Shaunti Feldhahn, has written a book called The Kindness Challenge, and she wants you and me to take this challenge together with her. Now, you've got a website called jointhekindnesschallenge.com, Shaunti. Tell us what we'll find on your website.
So we set it up so that if people want to do the 30-day kindness challenge, which I hope everybody listening to this signs up, if they want to do it, they go and they sign up for it. They'll get daily reminder emails. Now, there's actually different versions of the challenge. You can do the version that we call the anyone version. Anyone can do this for anyone. But, your mother-in-law, your whatever. But there's also one for wives who want to do this for their husbands and want the specialized version of that. Like that's the relationship they want to work on. Or husbands who want to do this for their wives. Or parents that was a big part of the study group. There's a lot of parents who wanted to improve a relationship with their kids, or to do a version for the workplace because you're trying to improve a workplace relationship. So sign up for that, and you'll get the specific reminder emails with little hints and tips every day from the research, so that you start seeing, like, for example, okay, how am I negative specifically? Now, obviously, it's just they're little short emails, so there's no substitute for actually looking at the lists in the book, but it'll get you started. And there's also, on the website, there's also small group materials, because, again, I really feel like for any type of initiative that might have some challenging moments to it, it helps to do it with somebody else. I can't tell you how often in the research process I heard from people who, a group of women, for example, had done the 30-day kindness challenge together, and they were helping each other. And, they said that one or the other would, call a friend on day 3 and be like, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. Like, I'm going to stop. And the friend would, talk him off the ledge. No, you're okay. You'll do fine. Just keep going. Here's what I tried yesterday. And you're kind of holding each other's hands through it. And so we have the small group study that goes with it. And again, it's all free. I feel like God has asked me to just put this stuff out there for the benefit of the kingdom. I mean, I really, really hope that people will take advantage of these resources.
Well, you have mentioned throughout today's program that there are 3 kindness habits that we participate in during this 30-day kindness challenge. The first thing is to stop talking negatively about the person to him or her, or about him or her to other people. The other thing, number 2, is to find at least one positive thing you can sincerely praise or affirm about your person, and then also tell someone else that thing that you're praising your person for. And then number 3, do a small act of kindness or generosity for your person. And in your book and on your website, you've got great tips, ideas, oodles of ideas that we can use during our 30 days. But I like your idea, too, that you'll get feedback if you work as a group from some of the tips or ideas that person used as their kindness outreach that was really effective, because I would assume that some are even more effective than others.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You get really creative when you do this with other people who either are maybe in situations similar to you or just have a lot of wisdom to share. Like, for example, I actually found it was really encouraging. There was a group of military wives that did this. I was speaking on an Air Force base a couple of months ago, and there was a group of military wives that were going through this, and some of their husbands were deployed, and they were doing this for their husbands. And it's like, okay, how does that work? Like, you're not physically there, so what does an act of kindness or generosity look like? Like, how do you translate that into doing this over email or over Skype? And it was interesting to hear the military wives say that this is something that actually brought them closer to their husbands, but they never would have known it if they hadn't done it together with people who could support each other in that unique situation.
So, as we discussed earlier, most people don't tell the person that they're being kind to that they're their target person. Mm-hmm. Do they ever inform them, or can you keep it a secret forever?
Actually, here's the fun thing. So I don't know whether people will be interested in this. Some people will, some people won't. But here's a fun idea, is that to keep secretly, don't tell the person, and keep secretly a gift journal. Like go buy a pretty little journal, a little notebook from Target or whatever, and secretly every day write down those affirmations, right? So that number 2 thing that we're going to look at every day, what's something you can praise or affirm, and every day you don't just tell them, you write it down secretly. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then when the 30 days are over, you wrap it up and you give it to them as a really special gift. And that's a way to say, I've been doing something and I realized I needed to work on myself. I've been looking at all the things that I thought you needed to do, and I realized what a special person you are. And here's this gift journal that, tracks my thoughts about you for 30 days, my positive thoughts. It's powerful.
Wow. That is Jesus in action right there.
Yeah. It's one of these things that's so super simple, and yet we just don't think to do it. So it's a good excuse. Think to do it. You
must love your life, Shaunti Feldhahn. What a movement you're creating. Tell us about some of the feedback you're getting.
Oh, my word. I was, frankly, shocked as I started to think about, okay, how do I launch the book? How do I get other people to do the 30-day kindness challenge? Like, I thought that this was so important for our culture. And so I started reaching out to some of the organizations that I work with. I work with marriage and family organizations and leadership groups and so on. And I thought, maybe I could convince one or two of them to do the 30-day kindness challenge with me. Like, I did just a private label version of it. And they all started saying yes. They all started saying, this is so crucial. We need more kindness in our culture. We want to help. And so, I could never have talked, for example, Focus on the Family is doing Focus on the Family 30-Day Kindness Challenge. I have no power to talk Focus on the Family into something like that, but it's something God is doing.
Amen.
And so all these organizations are stepping forward to try to encourage their followers, their people to do it as well. So I hope that anyone listening to this who, for example, is in leadership at a church, I hope you will take this to your church as to do a version of this for your church, to do the 30-Day Kindness Challenge, and use it not only as an opportunity to build community within your church, but to reduce the negativity. Can you imagine the average church, the power we would have if we trained the negativity out of every Christian sitting in a church?
Yes.
Goodness gracious, what power the gospel would have.
That's unity right there. Shaunti, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed by this, and I bet you...
It's all what God has done.
And I bet you're very glad that you invested 10 years of your life in this, because it's changing lives around the world now. Kudos to you.
That's my prayer.
So tell us again the website address we need to visit.
Sure. It's jointhekindnesschallenge.com.
Jointhekindnesschallenge.com. You can sign up for daily reminder emails. There are free resources, plus you can take a self-assessment quiz and find out what your kindness quotient is. So you can do that as we wrap up today's roadshow. One more time on that website address, jointhekindnesschallenge.com. You can also purchase the new book through the website. The name of the book, The Kindness Challenge, by today's very special guest, Shaunti Feldhahn. It's also available wherever books are sold, whether at a Christian bookstore or online, and her name is spelled Shaunti Feldhahn, Feldhahn. Shaunti, this has been a powerful hour, and we take the challenge.
All right. I have to, too.
Well, for Shaunti Feldhahn, I'm David Warren, and what has it been today? Another great roadshow.
You've been listening to The Roadshow. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Roadshow, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.